we've already got our two hex pieces made here. You can see the first one, I'm just peeling it off, and we have this hexagonal shape made of balsa. The second one should now be dry. I'm going to go ahead and unpin it. I'll collect my pins in a little pan here to make sure they don't get lost. And as we pull the pins out, there we go. Now we can just go ahead once again, and the super glue or cyanoacrylate glue doesn't stick to the waxed paper. Now that I've got the two pieces that will form the top and bottom of my hex box, the next challenge is to make the spars that give the box three-dimensional height. We have a place on the plan here which indicates how this should be done. We're going to take our balsa plank and put it right on top of the plan and use that to measure. We'll make two marks, one on either side, and then we're going to use a ruler, and there's no need really to draw a line here. I'm going to take my razor knife and I'll simply go ahead and pull across a couple of times. Once this goes ahead and scores the wood, you can easily break off your piece, and here's where your sandpaper comes in. You're going to take and sand the edge, first on one side, then on the other, to make sure that the edges are both smooth and parallel. Rather than cutting so many pieces all individually and trying to sand them all to the same length, we've simply taken and cut the plank to the width of one spar, and we're going to use the balsa stick cutter to go ahead and cut our 6 individual spars from the plank. There's 4, 5, and 6. These 6 small sticks will actually be used to separate the top and bottom of the box and give it height. We'll see how that works next. Okay, now that we have our hex and our 6 spars, it's time to put the vertical pieces together. Now, if this were a professional construction job, we'd be watching for correct angles, lining things up with protractors, etc. But here, we have to rely a lot more on the human eye. I'm going to go ahead and put a small drop of glue on the corner. There we go. And now I'm simply going to take one of the pieces, and holding it vertically, I'm going to go ahead and exert a small amount of pressure and count to roughly 10. Once I do, I have a stick which is now in place, and as you can see, it's vertical. So let's go ahead and set up the others. Here's the second square. I do tend to do the insides of the square first, and I like to make sure that the sticks are all the way outside to the corners. And again, each time I'm giving it a little pressure, counting to about 10. Now, if these aren't perfectly vertical, we'll have the ability to adjust that when we put the second set on. Here's my third one, and I want to make sure I hold the hex down carefully. I put this in. I'm taking a look to make sure that it's vertical as best I can, and there are 3. Another drop of glue. Here's the 4th one. And again, a little bit of pressure means that the glue cures fairly quickly and the stick stands. Now, these won't be perfectly strong for at least 10 minutes, but we're going to use that to our advantage because it will allow the sticks to flex slightly as we go ahead and glue the top and bottom halves of the hex box together. There we are. Making sure we're in the right place. And we'll swing it around and do the last one. like so. And if they're tipped a little bit, you can often go ahead at this stage and simply use your finger to straighten them out a little bit, because the glue joint isn't completely hard and won't be for about 10 minutes. Now that we have this piece done and we have the 6 vertical studs, we're going to go ahead and take this and flip it right over. And now it looks kind of like a 6-legged table. We're going to go ahead and set it on top of the other hex. We're going to align it as best we can, and you can see that now the 2 pieces are aligned together. Let's go ahead and start gluing. I'm going to go ahead and put a dot of glue on, again, starting with the inside 4 corners. Here's the first stick, and getting the first one into place is fairly easy. And with that setting up, I'm going to come now to the opposite corner. Again, working to hold the base steady. Put a little glue in, take the opposite corner, and secure it. Now we can start to go ahead and get the 3rd corner of the hex box in shape. And again, this gives us a chance to pull the stud out and align it to the proper place. And there's our 3rd, and now our 4th part of the interior cube. And once we have the interior, then we can go ahead and glue the ends. 1 and 2. Once again, be sure that you're conservative with your glue. Too much glue adds weight without adding any strength. Now, I've got a hex box that's fully assembled. Of course, it will need a few minutes to dry, but this structure isn't quite done. We've got one more bit to handle. Actually, if your students build a box like this without any diagonal struts, this box will hold a stack of 5 to even 10 or more textbooks before collapsing. So this box will hold well over 1,000 times its own weight, but we can increase its strength by at least a factor of 3 by adding diagonal braces that will reach across the inside corners of the box, and that will be our next step. Our next step is to insert diagonal braces in the sidewalls of the inner cube of the hex box. In order to do this, we're going to go back to our original plan. Here, we're going to use the plan to make sure that we cut sticks with a true 45-degree angle. So I'll go ahead and cut a stick here to make sure I get the angle correct. Once I've done this, I'll set the stick aside. Now it's time to take a look at my box. Now, this is perhaps the most difficult part of the construction. I'm going to go ahead, and I think we can see it better here. I'm going to go ahead and put the box here, hold it in my hands, and I'm going to stretch a diagonal piece across. Now, using my razor knife, I'm going to make a thin mark, nothing more than an indication. Once I've done this, I can go ahead and, putting my razor knife right on the mark I've made, I can go ahead and cut a piece. Now, if everything works properly, and I've done everything as I should, this piece should fit nicely inside the diagonal space. And once it's fitted, we can then go ahead and glue it in. Let's try this side. There we are. Now, this actually fits without being held in place, and it's made quite strong. I can now use a drop of glue at each intersection, and we've put in one diagonal strut. Now that we've got all the spars, you can see looking down from the top of the box, you have the classic hex shape. but turn it on its side and you can see that each side of the inner cube of the box is crossed by a diagonal strut. And these diagonal struts will give the system incredible vertical strength. And that's what we'll rely on. For all intents and purposes, the structure of the box is now finished. In my classroom, we prefer to go one step further and cover the box with tissue paper. That gives it a neat appearance, and we like to do it in school colors. It also teaches skills which will be necessary if students go on to build other more complex projects, such as building balsa and tissue airplanes. Now, we've built our hex box, and we've reinforced it with diagonal braces. But will it stand up to the test? Will it hold the load we've intended for it? Let's find out and see. For our first load, we're going to go ahead and place a textbook on the box. Now we have to be careful and balance it correctly. And it's holding the textbook just fine. But can it hold more? Let's find out. This is a 25-pound weight. And when we place it on carefully and make sure that it's balanced properly, we find the box is now holding the 4-pound textbook plus a 25-pound weight. That means it's holding almost 30 pounds. Let's go ahead and add another textbook. It seems almost inconsequential, but it gives us room for yet another 25-pound weight. Will it hold? Finally, we see the textbook and the 50 pounds of extra weight have crushed our box. But in fact, it did hold up over 40 pounds. For a 1.5 gram box, this means that this box held up approximately 25 kilos before collapsing. That means that our box held up an astonishing 10,000 times its own weight before finally being collapsed. You can do it too in your classroom when you and your students try 10,000 to 1.